Hello, and welcome to Watch and To Play, a podcast about two things, movies and video games. I am your host. My name is Will Bretz. These are my two biggest passions, so much so that is part of what I do now for a living. I started making movies with my friends when I was probably like 10 years old. Just growing up, we had like a little video camcorder, and I used to edit on Pinnacle Studios. Now I'm a grown-up, and I edit on Avid as well as Premiere, and I've worked on a ton of unscripted documentary, lots of sports documentaries. My first job out of college actually was with NFL Films, where I was lucky enough to work on Hard Knocks, which is still on HBO, and won an Emmy as an associate producer on that. Since then, I've worked on a ton of ESPN 30 for 30s, including a 4-episode series called Once Upon a Time in Queens about the New York Mets in 1986 and how they won the World Series while doing enough drugs to kill a small horse. For the past 3 years, I've worked for ITV when they make Queer Eye. I worked on a Netflix show called Snack vs. Chef, random cooking competition shows. So I've kind of been all over. My passion throughout it all has been movies and TV and whatever makes you feel something. Along with that, I also am a pretty obsessive video game player. I've been playing video games since before I can remember. My dad bought us a NES when we were really, really young, so I grew up with Duck Hunt and Super Mario Brothers and Kirby and Donkey Kong and lots of Nintendo, but then we got a PlayStation 2, so lots of Tony Hawk, then Xbox, and now I've got a Switch and a PS5 and can't seem to shake it. I still just love video games. So anyway, on this podcast, what I want to do is I want to recommend one thing to watch and one thing to play for the listeners at home. And I'm really, really excited about this idea. This naturally just seems to be what I do in conversations with my friends. It's one of my favorite things to talk about is just what I've been seeing, what they've been seeing, what can we recommend, why do we like it? And I feel like word of mouth is the best way to figure out what you want to check out next. So I'm really, really excited to do this first episode. I have one movie and I have one video game that I would highly recommend to anyone out there. So without any further ado, let's get started. Movie I would like to recommend today is one I just watched the other week, and I had heard a lot about it, but never got along to watching it until really recently. This actually was up for Best Picture in 2021, and it's a Japanese film called Drive My Car. It is directed by Ryusuke Hamaguchi. It's based on a 2014 short story by Haruki Murakami. It's starring Hidetoshi Nishijima and Toko Miura, and cinematographer Hidetoshi Shinomiya. Drive My Car is a long movie. It is 3 hours long, so strap in if you're going to watch this. The first 30 minutes of it are kind of like they almost feel like a really, really good pilot for a TV show. You're introduced to our main characters, a husband and wife. The husband is a theater director and actor. But what is kind of crazy about his theatrical productions is they are multilingual. So actually every actor in the play is speaking a different language. And they pull this off in a couple of ways. One is that the way that they're able to have all these actors speaking different languages and acting off each other is because all of the rehearsals are done to a specific cadence. And so when the timing is the same for everyone, then the lines can be read to that cadence, and then the actors know when to respond, when to react based on that cadence, rather than actually understanding all of the languages that are being spoken in the play. It's really, really interesting. At one point in the movie, there's actually someone cast who speaks only Korean Sign Language. And that totally works as well with this method. It's such an interesting concept, and I'm not surprised this was based off a short story, because you could definitely pull that off in writing. It's really awesome to see someone pull this off in a movie. I don't know if this exists in real life, actually. If there are multilingual theatrical productions like this, I would be super impressed if there were. But I also think that it's something, thanks to editing, you can really pull off well in a movie. So that's fascinating. And then for the audience, the audience in the movie, they're able to understand all of the actors because there's actually a projector in the background behind the actors that displays the subtitles in all the different languages so that they're able to understand as you go throughout the play every line just based on whichever subtitle they can read. So he's our main character. His name is Yusuke Kafuku, and his wife, named Oto, is a screenwriter. And she seems like a pretty successful TV, maybe movie screenwriter. And her creative process is a little interesting. She actually comes up with her plots by narrating them while she has sex. So you have this really quick introduction into the intimate life of these two characters because they're having sex, and she is just like narrating this really wild, crazy story. It's a little jarring, but it's also fascinating and somewhat believable. And so they both have a really interesting dynamic. You can tell that they don't have any kids. You can tell that they really value each other's creativity and artistic lifestyle, and just have like a deep relationship that is also enhancing both of their creativity. Another way that Yusuke's creativity is influenced by his wife is the way he actually practices lines for his plays is through a tape recorder in his car. His car is like this old Saab, like red, kind of sporty old car, and he's got a tape player in there. And he actually has his wife record the other lines. And then, like I said, it's all based on a cadence. And so he knows the timing and he can rehearse his lines while his wife does the lines of every other actor. He does his own based off her. So he's constantly practicing his lines in the car as he's driving around Japan. And I would say that the first 30 minutes kind of feel like, what's happening? Like, where are we going? These two characters are very interesting, but what are they going to do? What's next? I don't want to spoil too much. So if you're already hooked, if you already find this interesting, you can stop this right now. Don't go watch the trailer because this will spoil it for you. But if you don't care about a minor spoiler that happens in the first 30 minutes of the movie, then keep listening. One day, Yusuke comes home and he finds his wife cheating on him. He doesn't do anything, and he actually just kind of leaves. The following day, his wife actually wants to have a pretty serious conversation with him, and you can tell that he's very afraid. And he agrees, but he kind of avoids her all day. He comes back later that night, and he finds his wife on the floor, and she actually has passed away from a brain aneurysm. And that's the first 30 minutes of the movie. Very emotional, very hard-hitting, just absolutely gut-wrenching. You can tell that the rest of the movie, this is going to be a story about grief. That's our first 30 minutes. The next 2.5 hours take place 2 years later. He actually gets hired to put on a show like he does these multilingual theater productions in Hiroshima. So he goes there. He agrees to put on a production of Uncle Vanya. He's just going to direct it. He doesn't want to act in it. Acting, I think, reminds him too much of his wife. So he is going to direct it, and he's working on casting. And there's one stipulation that the theater company puts on him is that he is not allowed to drive while he is preparing for this show. You'll find out why, but obviously he does not like that at all because driving is a really important ritual for him. That's where he practices his lines. He's got this car that he loves and doesn't want anyone else to drive. But the theater company actually has already hired a driver for him. They hire the same one, and it's this young woman. She's kind of tomboyish. She's wearing a baseball cap, and her name is Misaki. And Misaki basically tells him to shove it and starts driving his car. Kind of has an audition for driving his car, and she passes with flying colors because she's a great driver. And as the story goes, they start to develop a really interesting relationship. The theater production is really deeply emotional for our main character because it's so connected to his wife, and you'll find out why. But I just think to go more broadly, I think it's a beautiful movie. It is shot incredibly well. I think the cinematography is beautiful. You got these long sweeping shots from overhead of Hiroshima, like the coastline, these bridge shots of them driving. There's like a garbage facility at one point, and even that's beautiful. They're rehearsing parts of the play in a beautiful park. It's just really gorgeous to look at, and I kind of love that it's 3 hours because they can really take their time showing off those shots and the environment. It's beautiful, and yet we're in Hiroshima where horrible things have happened. And it kind of works perfectly with our main character, because, he's grieving and trying to figure out a life without his wife. I just think that the environment and our character and the story just all intertwine really, really beautifully. I think the music is great. It's emotional, but not draining. It's just an enjoyable ride. Like, drive my car. It just puts you in a kind of state. It's almost kind of meditative. And because it's 3 hours long, I think I actually fell asleep the first night I turned it on, and then I finished it the next day, which I don't think there's any harm in doing that if you don't need to marathon it. But I just knew within the first 30 minutes that I was going to finish this movie, no matter what. Like, absolutely. It had me hooked really quickly. It definitely got a lot of praise. 2021 Academy Awards, it had 4 nominations and 1 win. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, and it won for Best International Feature Film. Also at the Japan Academy Film Prize, was nominated for 9 nominations, and it won 9 times. Clean sweep. Picture of the Year, Director of the Year, Screenplay of the Year, Best Actor, Outstanding Achievement in Cinematography, Lighting Direction, Sound Recording, Film Editing, and Newcomer of the Year for the female lead, Toko Miura. I would highly recommend this movie if the 3 hours doesn't, immediately turn you off. I think it's just a really beautiful ride and a story about grief and overcoming, maybe not even overcoming, but just like learning to live with grief, especially about people who may have passed that are flawed but still are important to us. Sometimes we can think that like you only grieve people who are perfect, and this is kind of grief for people who are imperfect, and I find that way more believable and way more realistic. So I don't want to say any more. I hope you watch it. I will watch it again eventually, but 3 hours is tough to come by unless it's Lord of the Rings for like the 20 billionth time for me for some reason. Continuing on, I have one video game to recommend to people, and I chose this game partially because it is available on like every system, including your phone. So I wanted to recommend a game that like anyone could get into. You don't need a big expensive console or a computer or something. You can play this on Android, you can play it on iOS, you can play it on Mac or Nintendo Switch or PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5 or Windows or Xbox One or Xbox Series X. This game is Balatro. Balatro came out last year in 2024, and a lot of people immediately kind of had it pegged for Game of the Year. This is an indie game. This was actually made by a developer called Local Thunk, who is one guy from Saskatchewan. It cost $10 on the App Store. So very affordable and easy to get into. It is a mobile game that you could get addicted to, and if you do and it's a problem, I'm sorry. So at the start of playing Balatro, it's kind of like a mix between solitaire and poker. It's kind of like a poker game that you play by yourself. So you have the typical poker hands, a pair, two pair, flush, straight, royal flush, full house, and they're all worth different amounts of points. Just like poker, usually, the harder the hand is to complete, the more points it's worth. So a pair is worth less than two pair. And what you want to do you basically play rounds. They call them blinds, and you kind of have like a point threshold, like 300 points is what you're trying to reach, and you have a certain amount of hands you can play to reach that point total. And if you do reach it, then congratulations, you win some money, and then you move on to the next round. And before you move to the next round, you actually visit a shop where you spend that digital money to buy new cards and just keep improving your deck so that your hands are worth more, and you keep being able to reach higher and higher thresholds of points as you go. The thing that makes Balatro very, very different is that it is a game that wants you to break it. It wants you to break the rules so that you're almost like hacking the system and destroying these point totals. Like, eventually you're going to be able to play like two pair, and where that hand might have gotten you like 100 points in the beginning of the game, if you build your deck correctly, then two pair can actually end up worth like 1,000,000 points. It's a really, really interesting game. It takes a little bit to get used to understand like all of the different ways that you can break it. So for example, what if you wanted to add multiple kings of diamonds to your hand or to your deck? You can. What if you wanted to add multiple aces, and like what if every ace just counted as any suit, a club, a diamond, a spade, whatever? What if your straights and flushes you could actually make with just 4 cards instead of 5? You can do all of this, and it's encouraged, and you're just going to get better and better at the game as you go. And it becomes just a really fun, well, they call it a roguelike, where roguelikes are when you play it over and over again and it kind of doesn't really have an ending. Even when you beat it, you can just keep playing again and go even further. It is a really, really fun and addicting game with a pretty simple like set of rules in the beginning that you complicate yourself as you go. I don't think it's a really like tough point of entry. I think that if you understand what solitaire is, if you understand what poker is, and not to like a crazy degree, if you have a basic understanding of what poker is, then I think you can get into this game pretty easily. It's really, really addictive. Like, people have just been loving this game, and like I said, it's on mobile, so I hope you can check it out. It's a really wild and crazy game that like I haven't seen before. I think that's one of my favorite things, is like when you find a game that like uses rule sets that maybe are pretty well known, like poker, but then the developer just throwing that out the window and being like, no, this is actually completely different, I think is really, really cool. So try out Balatro if you have time, and let me know what you think. That's spelled Balatro. So those are the 2 things I got today. Thank you very much for listening. So like I said, today we talked about one movie to watch, which is Drive My Car, and we talked about one game to play, which is Balatro. I hope you check out one or both of those if you want to, and please let me know what you think about them. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time on To Watch and To Play.